Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with my friend, Samantha Allen. She is the founder of Law Mom, and she's also the recent winner of the Best of the South Shore for her estate planning firm. And so what I wanted to do is talk with her about estate planning, in particular about her firm and how she specializes in not just, late in life estate planning that we might think of for people who are trying to plan, maybe for wealth transfer and all of those things. She really focuses on families. And so we all know that families come in all shapes and sizes. And I think that it's great that she is looking to help people who've maybe been underserved or kind of maybe intimidated by the legal process in the past when it comes to actually getting this stuff done, because it's a scary topic for a lot of people to think about, but she does a great job with it. So thank you so much, Sam, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. I'm so excited. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. So tell me a little bit about why you started your firm and how you're a little bit different than some of the other estate planning firms out there.
Yeah, so I started Law Mom after I had my son Wes, who is now almost 2.5, which is crazy to me. But following his birth, I had an extremely traumatic experience. So the birth itself was terrible, and then the follow-up after it, I was basically bedridden essentially for months after having him, and I didn't have any estate planning in place. And at that time, I basically almost lost my life. So it was a really big wake up call. I was like, okay, I'm in my 30s. My husband and I are like, oh, we're young. We don't need to worry about it. All of those types of things. And we actually did. And I started writing our estate plan from my hospital bed, which I wouldn't recommend on anyone doing that. Try to get your plan in order now. And it really prompted me to reach out to people in the community, especially my mom friends, asking, hey, do you have a plan? Like, what happens with your children if something happens to you? And I started to see these misconceptions and assumptions that were coming up across the board. And it prompted me to think, hey, I can really use my law degree and make a difference, and also be available to my family and help other families. And so my husband came up with the name, and now we have Law Mom.
Love it. I think that name, because I think sometimes we do need a mom at any age when some of the stuff is scary or intimidating, or just even you can have, I know plenty of people that, well educated, like great at their jobs, but when it comes to anything like legal or even, financial, sometimes it just feels very foreign, a little intimidating, maybe a lot of jargon and a lot of language that they just don't understand, which they didn't go to school for multiple years to learn. So I think that's great that you focus on that, because I don't think I really questioned or thought much about like estate planning until my family grew. Because even with my husband and I, when we first got married, we bought a house. We're like, okay, insurance, we'll think about that. But then, I think in the past year as well, it's gotten a lot of people to think about like, well, what if something did happen to me? And who am I? What would happen? So what does happen if we're in the state of Massachusetts? So in the state of Massachusetts, what happens if if you don't have a will, and what happens to your family?
So if you don't have a will, your estate will go through the probate court. So essentially, it's a place where you go if assets don't have somewhere to go, right? So the probate court has to go through and be like, okay, you've passed away. This asset goes to so-and-so based on Massachusetts law. I won't bore anyone with the details of that, but basically it's how it plays out. And when you think about it, it's really a stranger following the law, making decisions for you because you haven't planned, right? So all of this is preventative because you can actually plan and dictate where your assets go. When we think about minor children, that's another thing, right? So we want to say, okay, let's document where our children, who they go to physically, right? If something were to happen to the parents. Again, not documenting means a probate court, a stranger judge who doesn't know you, doesn't know your child, doesn't know your wishes or values, will make a decision with regard to where your child goes. Anyone can petition the probate court to become that guardian of your child, which scares a lot of people because we know family dynamics. Usually there's someone that people are like, I don't want my child to go to that person. So again, it's all preventative, right? So you can do protection plans and put them in place, long-term guardians, short-term guardians, to make sure that your wishes are adhered to for your minor children, so that your children don't, one, end up in state care, and then two, that your child will go to whom you want them to go to. And we also do a lot of planning in terms of documenting what parents like to include values, morals, child rearing, those types of things. And it starts a conversation with the people that they've picked to say, hey, are you up for this task? How's it going? And the cool thing about what we do is we can make updates. So at our office, what makes us a little bit different is that we do 3-year check-ins, and they're complimentary with all of our clients. So you can come back, meet with us for free. We'll go through your plan. We'll tell you updates that we think you should make. You can make them or not. We can talk about updating the kids protection plan that I just spoke about. And in particular for my family, Wes was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So we went through our long-term guardians and asked them if they were okay doing shots, right? Because giving shots to a little child is not for everyone. So we confirmed that, and we had to make some adjustments and changes to those plans. And our office focuses on that because it's so important. You and I both know with children, life is changing by the minute. So we want to make sure that we're updating.
Yeah, and that's so true. I definitely know a few people who, a few of my clients that did not have any planning in the cards are now like, we're having another baby. Like, where did that come from? So
Totally.
it's definitely been a pretty wild time as far as people's families are concerned. But I think it's so, it's so important that you mention that, because when it comes to specific medical needs or behavioral needs, like, I think a lot of us assume that everyone would do the right thing. But I think we know that may not happen.
Right.
Right. I think, you want to assume, but what if everyone steps in? What if everyone wants to, and I think us, like, we won't decide, we won't let someone else decide what our kids, like, eat for lunch or do for this, but we'll leave this decision up in the air, which is just really, it's not something that I think any of us would ever intentionally want. But I think it's so important to make sure that it's on people's radar, because there are some children that do have different needs that may require more attention, more care, more time, or a different type of commitment. So can you tell me some of the things, that you do to help people who do have, like your son who has a medical condition that requires a lot of extra attention and care? How do you help families prepare for that if they really think the only person capable of doing it is themselves?
There's a lot of conversations that go into our planning, and the reason why I set up Law Mom was to really help families make the best decisions, right? And really be able to talk through it. And having my own firm allows me to do that. I can really spend time with my clients, asking them, hey, what do you need? What's important to you? Like, there's so many conversations that we go through, and we'll talk about, sometimes clients need special needs planning. What does that look like? Well, we take a deep dive into what's going on in their family dynamic. We look at their finances. So someone like you would come into, and we include like an advisor in the meeting. We talk about what potential long-term care might be needed for the child, or like if something happens to the parents, what that inheritance looks like, how we protect it. So if they're getting government benefits, they're not affected. Those types of things come up in a lot of our conversations. And, something might not be present right now, but something could happen in 5 years. So how do we plan for potential foreseeable things that could happen? So we're kind of like looking at our crystal ball, being like, okay, this could happen. But again, going back to that check-in, that's why it's so important, right? So I have like lots of junk drawers in my house. So if anyone's with me, we don't want your plan to go in those drawers. We want to keep updating it.
Yeah, and I think that's so true, because there could be changes. There could be things that are a big concern in infancy, or like that go, maybe they change or go away, or that they appear later on. So I think that's really important to have that, knowing that you're going to be checking in every 3 years, because life does change, it doesn't, but at least you have that piece of mind on what you needed to do. Also, something else that I think is important to plan for, and I talked to a lot of clients recently, they're not minor children anymore, but maybe adulting has been a little tricky as far as what happened if they were to, say, inherit wealth in their early 20s. I know where I would go. It would probably be Miami Beach, and or probably a casino in Las Vegas. And so what do you do to help parents who are maybe concerned with what could potentially happen if their young adult child was to, maybe come into a lot of money and they're a little afraid of what they do with it.
I would be right there with you on Miami Beach buying lots of purses and bathing suits. No, all jokes aside, I think it's super important, right? So those conversations happen a lot. And when I have clients with very young children, we always laugh because I always tease and I'm like, my sons are never getting married. They're staying at home with me. That's not true, right? But like in my head, I'm thinking of that. So inheritances, how to protect them. There's ways that you can plan based on your specific needs or wants for your family. So your children, adulting, those types of things. When you are doing your estate plan and giving essentially to someone else, right? If you think about it that way, transitioning your assets to another person, you can put in provisions so that your child or your beneficiary, or that could be like a niece, nephew, whatever, inherits through a trust, right? So you could say, I am worried about X, Y, and Z. We talked to you about those worries. I'm going to talk to you about options that you have, which include that type of trust. And you have a trustee in charge who is just to oversee the distribution. So giving the money, making sure specific provisions that you put into your trust might need to be met, or saying like, okay, I'm worried that my beneficiary might have a spending problem, right? They're going to that casino, putting in certain language into the trust to make sure that the money is protected, so that you're almost having a manager, right, of like the assets that you're giving to your beneficiaries, which is a really cool thing because you can really get creative within your trust. And if you're not here when your children or your beneficiaries are inheriting, you can really put your legacy into it and really still be around, right? You could say in a trust, for example, if you go to college or you're working a 40-hour week job, you get X amount of money, or whatever it is that's important to you. So we've come up with some really great plans for our families that really dictate their wishes and leave an explanation to their beneficiaries as to why this is being done.
Yeah. And I think people's do that, their priorities would change, in their 20s, their 30s or 40s. So I think that being able to, because it is basically, control is being handed over, but it's nice to be able to know that it would be, which I think is all that people really want, is to make sure that, that their family is okay. And so I think that all of those things that you're considering, as far as being in school or having, a job or career, that's really, I think it's a very kind thing to do when it comes to estate planning, is to make sure that things are taken care of, that there's explanations, and there is someone like you to help people who are struggling, who are going through this. So I think that is something that's really important. What about blended families? If somebody is now, they want to make sure that they don't disinherit their new, their child, but they also have maybe a new spouse or new children involved in the family. How can estate planning help protect those families from some of the things that we may have heard or seen with evil step parents and things like that, where, you could protect your family and make sure that you're also, benefiting your new family?
That's so funny because I was just talking to someone about Cinderella today and we were cracking up laughing. But honestly, I feel like when you're talking about this stuff, the minute I say to someone, oh, I do estate planning, their eyes glaze over. So we're trying to think of ways to make it as like interesting as possible. So when you talk about blended families, there's a lot of family dynamics that come in, right? So two families, who knows how many, like 5 kids on one side, a couple kids on the other side. And you're right, like if you don't take the proper steps, you could intentionally be really starting to disinherit your family, right? If you don't plan correctly, or taking away assets. So there's different tools that we use. Sometimes it's separate trust planning. Sometimes, there's specific elections we can make. But again, going off that creativity that's allowed in estate planning, we can really dictate and break down the assets, talk to the spouses, talk to them about what's important to them, and make sure that there's no issues that arise, right? Because of course, in blended families with children from different marriages, there could potentially be a ton of conflict if the planning isn't done right. And say like, mom, dad, they get married, mom passes away, new dad inherits, stepdad, right? That can cause major issues with regard to inheritances. And then again, going back to that legacy planning, explaining in letters or videos or whatever our clients wish, explaining why things were done the way they were done makes a huge difference, because oftentimes I feel like the assets are there. That's great. People are excited, whatever, they're getting an inheritance, but they really, really want to know like the reasoning behind stuff, or like the legacy, right? Like my grandmother passed away and we had like a meeting. I don't know, we had met up like couple months prior, and I had all of these memories with her, and I was like, I wish like I videoed that, or I like had her write it down, right? So we start to do that with clients if it's important to them. But blended families, absolutely, planning is really crucial, because there's so many things that happen under Massachusetts law that could cause major conflicts.
Yeah. And how about for the single moms and single dads? If that happens too, where you might have two people with very separate ideas and wishes. Like, how does that happen? How does that work through in the courts? And what do you suggest that those co-parents do?
Yeah, so I mean, in any event, right, we always want to say like work it out, like parents, but like that's not always the case, right? You're like, oh, I wish like I could co-parent really easily and like my wishes would be adhered to. So we want to document it. At any time that a single parent comes in, if the other bio parent is still around, we want to know like the family dynamic. We want to understand what's going on. And it's always good to document your guardians, right? The guardians that you wish. And of course, with the understanding that, legal custody, if the other bio parent has it, the likelihood of your child going to that parent is pretty high. So when we're thinking about naming guardians, I always urge parents, like single parents specifically, to name guardians regardless of that. Because what if the other parent is deemed unfit? What if the other parent passes away? Those types of things. We want to document everything that we can, because those documents become your voice when you aren't here anymore, or if you're incapacitated. So that preventative planning, leaving your wishes behind through legal documents, makes a huge difference. And I always hear in my office, thank you, Sam, you've given us the peace of mind, right? So that's like what the biggest thing is. Yes, you get these documents. Yes, things are taken care of, but it's almost like a weight lifted off your shoulders. And sometimes I can see from the start with a client to the end, they're like, I don't know, is it really worth it? Because I get it, right? You're spending money and you're not getting anything. Like I'm the same way. I'm like, Chanel bag or planning? Like I'm a real person, like whatever it is.
Especially when you're selling like, non-tangible things like advice, yeah. Or, but you can tell, you're right, after that weight's been lifted, when people feel, because I think we all like to feel like we're doing the right thing and that we're getting organized and that things are taken care of. And we want to do the smart thing, but it's also like, that part of our brain that wants to do the fun thing. Right. But I think that this actually, as a parent, like every parent that I've suggested has come through, my office, that I've said, we need to get this done. This is good. This could be, big, this could be a very huge financial gap, or, this could get, very messy, or your wishes will not be followed through on, or, what's going to happen? Do you want your family to try to work things out on their own? Or do you want to be able to just have this tough thing be easier? And so that could be even temporarily, or, if it was something that happened, if they passed away. And most people think like, oh, I don't want to cause extra stress, or they've been an executor and been like, oh no, totally. I ever, had to wish this on anyone. It's so hard. It's so hard. So I think doing is so valuable and such an asset to the community, because you're probably the easiest person to talk to in the world. So it's nice to know that people can reach out to you and get the help they need. So before we wrap up, I did want to you, it's very important to us too at the firm, and just curious what some of the things are that you're helping people become aware of this month. I know you got pretty active after your son's diagnosis, but what are some things that you'd want to share with the audience or want everyone to know when it comes to to diabetes?
I would say for diabetes is just really learning, right? So I'm gonna cry. It's a mom thing. So I think learning, right? So learning about it, because it was something I was like, diabetes, like I don't need to learn about that, and then I had to learn about it, and now I really see all these like misconceptions about it and those types of things. But definitely just like asking questions. Like our 2-year-old Wes, he will tell you whatever you want to know about carbs, even though he'll just make it funny. I did like a post the other day about if you ask him about carbs, he's like a boy, so he'll be like, oh, there's like two carbs and boogers. Those things, like as funny as that sounds, but it is true. Just knowing that, I guess with anything, right? You never know what someone's going through. So if you can just give someone a hug or just be super kind, like with his diabetes, sometimes we don't sleep and then we have a 2-month-old, so we're awake a lot. So just, it's taught me a lot of empathy, patience, and trying to understand like what someone's going through and just being there to listen to them and learning about like what's important to their family, which I do in my work every day.
Yeah,
But
no,
definitely,
I think it's wonderful that you're spreading that message and that you're getting more people aware of it. And if your son is helping spread the message too with his information, I think it's great. I think there's so many, parents that are trying to do the best they possibly can for their kids. And so it's great for us to know at the firm, we're watching a lot of different companies that are making huge advances in this space. And so it's really important. And it's good to see, the community and all of the, all the children that are hopefully going to be helped with the research and the awareness that's going on. So how can people find you or reach you if they're curious to learn more about your firm?
So you can reach me on Facebook, we're Law Mom LLC. Instagram, you can reach out to us on our website, lawmom.com, schedule an appointment. If you're like a mom that just needs to vent about just anything, give me a call. I have a lot of those calls. But yeah, or shoot me an email, sam@lawmom.com. I'm at the firm. I'm always available to talk. And that is the best thing about having my own space.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's BondCast, and you can head over to beckbodie.com if you want to find out any more information or connect with us. Sam, thank you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful Veterans Day. Thank you to all the veterans tuning in, and have a wonderful, maybe long weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.